Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the final session of our Feminist Futures Institute. Good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is Tamika Middleton. I am the managing director at the Women's March, and I am so glad to greet you and to have been with you all these weeks and to see you one last time. I use she, her pronouns, and I am joining you from East Point, Georgia, the land of the Muskogee Creek Nation. We are so very grateful to be a part of your feminist journey, and we look forward to continuing to build a feminist future together. Last week, we had the great joy and pleasure of being joined and sharing space with Alexis Pauline Gumbs. Together, we honored the late, great Audre Lorde. We took a deep dive into her poem, Prologue. And we went deep into ourselves and found the things that we want to leave behind and the things we aim to find somewhere in the landscape past noon. And together we created our own collective poem, a vivid collective reimagination of what our feminist futures could be. If you missed that beautiful session last week, you can check out that episode as well as all the past episodes at womensmarch.com/feministfutures. So later this year, we will re-release the complete Feminist Futures Institute along with a watching guide so you can follow along at home at your own pace. So make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you keep following us. Make sure you stay on in connection with us. So now I am so honored to introduce our guests for this final episode, Rinku Sen and Ginna Green. So stay tuned and we will get started shortly. See you soon.
Hello.
Hey, Ginna.
Rinku, how's it going?
It's going good. So excited to be here and so happy to see you. Miss you.
Miss you too. Good to clap eyeballs on you and see your face. I'm delighted that I get to introduce you to our illustrious guests and friends who are here for the night, if I may. I'm going to hop right in and tell the world who Rinku Sen is. Rinku is the executive director of the Narrative Initiative. She's a writer and also a social justice strategist. She is formerly the executive director of Race Forward and was publisher of their award-winning news site Color Lines, which I read avidly for years and years. Under Sen's leadership, Race Forward generated some of the most impactful racial justice successes of recent years, including Drop the I Word, and a campaign for media outlets to stop referring to immigrants as illegal, resulting in the AP, USA Today, LA Times, and many more outlets changing their practice. She was also the architect of the Shattered Families Report, which identified the number of kids in foster care whose parents had been deported. Her books, Stir It Up and The Accidental American, theorize a model of community organizing that integrates a political analysis of race, gender, class, poverty, sexuality, and other systems. You can learn more about her current work at narrativeinitiative.org.
Thank you so much, Ginna. And I'm so excited that I get to introduce you. So my friend Ginna Green is a strategist, writer, movement builder, consultant, and partner and chief strategy officer at Uprising, where she co-founded the Media Badass Masterclass. She's also the co-host of Bintel Brief, the Jewish advice podcast from The Forward, the publication The Forward. At Uprising, Ginna leads the practice on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and philanthropic advising within the Jewish community. She's also the principal strategist for Uprising's progressive movement communications clients. She has worked as chief strategy officer at Bend the Arc, Jewish Action, also as managing director of the democracy program at Rethink Media, and in multiple roles at the Center for Responsible Lending. In addition to serving as president of Women's March Win PAC, the Political Action Committee, Ginna sits on the boards of Bend the Arc, Political Research Associates, the Jews of Color Initiative, the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable, and the Jewish Story Partners. She is a proud South Carolina native and mother of 4 kids who range from college to first grade. So we are super, super lucky that Ginna could fit us into her calendar. Where are you tonight, though, Ginna? Where are you right now?
I am tonight in South Carolina, in Columbia, the land of the Eastern Cherokee at the moment, and really, really, really delighted to be here. And my first story that I'm going to be sharing comes straight from home.
Oh.
I want to tell a little bit of a story about Majeska Simpkins. And, one of the interesting things about her story is it's actually kind of well kept that she was a little bit of a woman of means. Like she had a little bit of access to resources. Now, she was Black and in South Carolina, so she didn't have like a ton of money, but she had a little bit. And I think what's really interesting about Majeska's story is that, whether we are women of means, lots of means, little means, no means, the thing that's important is for us to be able to realize how we can use whatever means, whatever talents, whatever skills that we have. And Majeska, I really feel like outside of South Carolina, she doesn't get a whole lot of love, but she really was a force for not just civil rights in South Carolina, but throughout the South and indeed in the country. So I'm going to tell a little bit about Majeska Simpkins, whose home is a residence in Columbia and is used for meetings of social justice groups here today still, and is on the National Registry of Historic Places. So she was born in Columbia, which is where I am now. I was born in Georgetown on the coast, a little small town, but like I got a lot of love for the capital now. She was born here, and she got to go to college. She got to have a profession. She went, as many Black women who got to go to college did, became an educator. Not a whole lot of opportunities, but the door to being an educator gets closed when you get married. So when Majeska Monteith became Majeska Simpkins, she could no longer pursue the profession that she had been working at. And that is not the beginning of her activism and her social justice work, because she'd been having that in her mind and in her body her entire life. But it really became a turning point for the activism that she brought to her community in South Carolina. And what, I think we think a lot about court cases. When we think of the civil rights movement, we think of Brown v. Board of Ed, right? And she did bring Briggs v. Elliott, which was one of the cases that got wrapped up in Brown v. Board of Ed and went to the Supreme Court. So that was a case that she was a major activist and player in. But there were other cases. She was really motivated around Black teacher pay. There was a case that came forward that she brought up that was like, Black teachers need to be paid the same as white teachers. That was Majeska, who was one of the people behind that. She also worked in the all-white Democratic primary. That was Majeska, one of the women who was behind that, changing really South Carolina in major ways, thinking about the law and policy. But what was also amazing when I talked about using all the means that we have and all the skills and talents that we have at our disposal, she was instrumental in establishing the Waverly Good Samaritan Hospital for Black folks. Also here in the Midlands, she ran the Motel Simbeth, which was in the Green Book back in the day. It was known to be the place where Black folks could stop in Columbia. She was the host, the Thurgood Marshall, and the luminaries and the greats of that era who were fighting these cases in the Supreme Court for us. She became just a rock of the state NAACP, as well as in the Youth Congress as well. And I just feel like Majeska's story is such an inspirational one, at least for me, because she's from home. She's from here. And I'm really excited to be able to bring her story to more people.
I'm so glad you told her story, because I did not know about her life. And I'm so happy that we're doing this session and that we're part of an organization that actually believes that every single one of us has power. And it might not be your power, might not look like my power, but we both have it. And if nothing else, like the Nina Simone song, we got life, we're here. So because we're here, so many things are possible that people will try to tell us aren't possible, but if we all use our power toward those things, indeed, they become possible. And I love the part of Majeska's story where she's doing lots of different kinds of things. It's not all like voting. It's not all voter registration. It's not all popular education. There's some service provision there. There's some creating of community life and social life there.
Exactly.
There's like actually making sure people can get healthcare, like direct services. So I really, really, really love that. I have actually kind of different period and different set of issues, but some of the same themes. A person I learned about recently is a woman named Patricia Navarro. And I learned about her through this incredible book and oral history archive of ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, ACT UP. Founded in 1987, really an organization that had an enormous effect on how people with AIDS were seen. And a lot of times when you talk about the early days of AIDS and about the early days of ACT UP, the image that comes to people's minds is of a gay white man, because that was a lot of who, how the world came to know about AIDS, or how the country did. But this oral history archive and the book, Let the Record Show, they interview so many different kinds of people who are part of ACT UP, and they put some particular attention to a Latina caucus that Patricia was part of. So I want to tell you a little bit about her life. Patricia Navarro. She was born in Texas. Her father was a miner who lost his mining job, and the whole family moved to California so that he could work in a munitions factory. So building weapons of war. That was what her father did. He was a union man, and always taught her. Her household wasn't all the time happy, but there were some issues. But her father taught her that you should always be trying to do something for the other guy, the other woman, your sister next to you. And so she grew up with that kind of ethos, and also seeing her mom put time into the community. Her mom stayed at home until her father got laid off, until there was a strike actually at the factory. And the strike drove Patricia's mom into the workforce. She became a garment worker and worked in that industry for a long time. So Patricia has her first child at age 16, 15, 16. And by the age of 20, she has a second child. And she has a second child that she didn't actually want to have, that she felt pressured by her husband to have. And in the transcript of her interview, you can see she says, I felt so trapped, like I didn't want to have another baby, but my husband expected it, and he expected a boy. And there was nothing I could do other than have the baby. So she has a kid, and then she starts going to community college. And at community college, she discovers feminism. She starts reading feminists like Gloria Steinem and Barbara Smith, and she just starts reading Audre Lorde, all these feminists of color, white feminists as well. And she starts to understand, a lot of women are forced to have kids that they didn't actually plan to have and didn't want to have because they had other plans for their lives. And you could demand some equality in your household. So she discovers feminism, and she becomes a student activist. She joins Chicana organizations, and she starts fighting for student rights and raising her kids. So we fast forward to her second child, Ray, her son, becoming an adult, coming out as a gay man, and eventually finding out that his partner, if they could have gotten married in those days, they probably would have been married. But his partner is HIV positive, eventually has AIDS and the particular kind of pneumonia that you get with HIV. And she starts to worry about her son's status and check on him and him getting tested. And he too turns out eventually to be HIV positive. So during one of her trips to New York to visit her son when he's in the hospital, she starts asking his friends, what is this ACT UP that Ray is always going to? What are these meetings that he goes to and he seems really attached to? And they tell her about ACT UP, and every Monday night she starts going to a weekly meeting when she's in New York. She begins going to demonstrations.
Wow.
Right after her son told her he too was positive, she went to the library and took out 5, 6 books about AIDS, but they were very thin and redundant, and she didn't really learn that much. But it's in these ACT UP meetings that she starts to learn about the actual science of the illness and get involved in demonstrations and actions. And over time, ACT UP racks up a very impressive set of victories. In New York State, they get laws passed that force healthcare insurers to accept patients with AIDS and to pay their bills, pay their medical bills like they're supposed to. ACT UP starts the first needle exchange program that helps people who became HIV positive through drug use to avoid becoming HIV positive. ACT UP gets the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, to change the definition of AIDS so that it includes many of the symptoms that only affect women who have AIDS. And that enables women who have AIDS or are HIV positive to start getting into clinical drug trials and to have drugs researched and developed for them. So by 1996, a lot because of Patricia's work and ACT UP's work, AIDS for many people who can get access to healthcare is no longer a fatal disease. There are antiretroviral drugs and folks get on them and they stop dying of AIDS. But there's still, even today, 40% of the people who need AIDS drugs in this country cannot get them. And they are largely people of color and women. And Patricia continues to be active in healthcare issues. And I'll drop it into the chat, or somebody will, but I really encourage people to check out this oral history archive of ACT UP members.
That is tremendous, Rinku, right? Like, I loved that you walked us through her like her transformation, right? Her learning about feminism and taking that. And it wasn't just, and feminism isn't just about women, it's about all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she ended up in this space, and not just ended up, but like moved into spaces where she could put her voice and her body in a way to make change for people and for all people. Really.
Yeah, and one of the most moving parts, which I think is such a factor for all of us who come into activism like this, is she talks about after her son dies, she's extremely depressed. She's really, really grieving. She's having a hard time coming out of it. And she's back in California now without his whole community. She's in Simi Valley in California. And she realizes, oh, but I was an activist here on things before AIDS. And I know people. I know people at the board of supervisors. I know people at these different nonprofits. So she says, I just took everything I knew, and having ACT UP as a sanctuary and to hold me, I started to apply everything I knew to AIDS. So, you know, some of us learn things at church, and some of us learn things at school, and some of us learn things at work. And unlike Majeska, this is a woman who had very few resources, but what she had herself, she put in. She was willing to put it in, and she had a place to go to make those contributions. The actual organizations existing, that does matter. Sometimes we have to start them. Sometimes we can join them, but there needs to be some kind of collective work there for people to join.
What a story. And I appreciate you lifting up where she came from and her dad being a union man And you just also mentioned the collective, right? And we think so much of the activism and the progress that we've seen in this country has been through and on the backs of workers, not just doing their obviously doing their jobs that has also powered this country, but also doing their organizing and bringing people together to fight for what's right. And another story that I want to tell is related to that, is also a little bit of a union story, and a story of someone who did not come from means as well. Rose Schneiderman, who is probably perhaps her name isn't super well known in many circles, but she popularized a saying, right? The woman worker needs bread and her roses too. She wasn't the first person to say it, but she was damn good on the stump. And so when she started saying it in the early 1900s, it began to really resonate and permeate the popular culture. And so we actually still think about bread and roses. And we have a strike in Massachusetts that was named the Bread and Roses Strike, right? So we can, while Rose didn't originate the phrase, she certainly popularized it. And her story is, very similar to a lot of Eastern European Jewish immigrants who came to the United States at the turn of the century. She came with her parents and with her siblings, but within 2 years, her father died. And as we know, back then and to this, and still, because we know that men make more than women do, when a man, head of household, dies, it puts a lot of stress and burden on the family. And so the mother had, her mother, Deborah Schneiderman, had a tough time and put, and Rose went to work very soon in her teenage years to try and help the family stay afloat. What's funny is, and I learned a lot from the Jewish Women's Archive about Rose, a little tidbit that I did not know beforehand that I learned in doing a little bit of research, was that respectability politics was alive and well back then, because her mom was like, Rose, look, can you not get a job in the sweatshops? Because that was considered like lower class work, right? Like she wanted a better life and possibility for her daughter. Was like, get a job and be a shop girl, get a job in the department store. And, the line in the Jewish Women's Archive article that I read that really sung to me was, but respectability didn't pay the rent, and you made more money actually in more dangerous jobs in the sweatshops and making clothes and being a seamstress. And so that is what Rose did, but quickly realized this was not a field of work. The sweatshops were exactly that. And she was part of the organizers of the Uprising of 20,000, which happened in 1909, 2 years before the tragedy at Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where 146 New Yorkers, most of them women who looked like the women who were just in that picture, died. And she already knew that the only way to get better conditions and the only way to improve their lot was actually to do it together. So she was like, I'm going to organize. And she said, she started organizing with the New York, I forget the actual name, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. So many acronyms, organizing with them and in organizing before Triangle Shirtwaist, which we still commemorate and honor to this day. 2 years before that was organizing. And then after was like, listen, we just died. We need more than for you to just memorize and commemorate our lives and loss. We actually need action. And so she actually became a leader in the American labor movement within a couple of years, I believe, of being involved in formal union organizations, was elected to national leadership, became someone that the Roosevelts trusted. And really, I think it's not hyperbole to say that she might have taught them most of what they knew about unions and most of what they knew about labor. And she also did the same thing for New York State. And for many, many years was playing this role of someone who understands the working class and understands the power that we all can have, especially when we're willing and able to recognize the collective and bring everyone in together and recognize the power that we have, not just as individuals, but when we as individuals work together.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this is a really good moment because I mentioned an archive and you mentioned an archive. This is a great moment for us to remind all of us that we got to keep our own archives, sisters.
Yes,
Keep your journals. If you're not a journaler, keep a scrapbook. If you're a scrapper, or if you're not any of those things, just keep a shoebox and throw things in it. Agendas from the meetings you've gone to, flyers, I don't know, pins and buttons, photos. I'm a big fan of Polaroids, those little Polaroid cameras, because, you don't like getting digital photos printed does anyone actually do that anymore? But so, when you're having events, maybe just invest in one of those modern Polaroids and then throw the little pictures in somewhere.
Love
Because the victor gets to tell the story, and there are many victories, small ones and big ones. And if we don't track the small ones, no one else is going to trust me. And this is how we know about Rose Schneiderman and Patricia Navarro, because someone built an archive for stories like that. And so if you have questions about where to put your stuff, eventually you can reach out to me at Narrative Initiative and I'll help you figure that out. But in the meantime, just keep that shoebox, put it in the attic, make sure your loved ones know where to find it when you are when you're done with this life, which all of us will be eventually. So
I just want to I love the physical collection of story and mementos. And one thing that I do that I actually learned from a former colleague is I've actually started recording voice memos to myself, that are short. And I don't know where that fits into the collection, but sometimes there's a moment in time where I feel like not just the victories we want to capture, but sometimes the struggle and sometimes the loss and sometimes what went into that. And whatever way works for you. I've got a few voice memos on my phone that every now and then I'm like, oh, let me go back to that. And I re-listen to them.
Yeah.
And it's as much for the future as it is for you to keep you going too.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to document our progress. Since we're on garment workers, oh my gosh. Garment work is like an arena that just draws everyday women. And then because of the workplace conditions, generates a lot of activism. So you mentioned the ILGWU. If you fast forward 80, 90 years from when Rose was an active member, you'd find the women at Fuerza Unida, which is an organization in San Antonio, Texas. It was started by Petra Mata and Viola Casares, who were garment workers in a Levi Strauss factory in San Antonio that got shut down, and they were all laid off. So Fuerza Unida said, well, you can't just lay us off with 2 weeks notice. Some of us have worked here 30 years and we built the Levi's brand and we made Levi's all of its money. So no. And they fought for an exit package. They did hunger strikes. They were in San Antonio, but they built committees that were in California and San Francisco that could chase the Levi Strauss CEO around because he wasn't doing the right thing. And they, in the end, won a package of around $30,000 for each of those laid off workers. Their activism prevented Levi Strauss from it at least slowed down plant closings. And their ability to speak about the effects of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, has fueled all kinds of economic justice work around the country. 2 garment workers, certainly bilingual, but not, of the community that they were organizing. They were born there, they lived there, they built families there, and they wanted the people and workers in that community to do well. And that organization still exists. And has various economic development projects that employ people and train them for new jobs, as well as continuing to fight on policy issues that really matter to them. Love those women, and I was lucky enough to actually know them in the 90s and early 2000s. So,
Rinku, you know, garment work. We've talked. I mean, we've told 4 stories tonight. 2 union stories, 2 garment stories. They're all, however, doing what would traditionally be considered women's work,
right?
And from the turn of the century to the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to now. And so I'm curious, like, we know that all women don't do all women's work, like, don't always do women's work, but there is something about that space of what has been historically our domain because of all of the systems that we know exist. But where do we think women's work sort of comes in or doesn't come in to everyday women getting the job done?
Well, I mean, I never want to be stereotypical about it, as in women are good at these things, men are good at these things. But I do think that organizing requires so much relating to people, and we have to do that always because of the way, because of the division of labor in our families and communities quite often. So I think that what feminism does is it brings all the things that are unpaid and that are private out into the public sphere. It says, because it benefited men to have those things be like only what you talked about at home or only with your family. You wouldn't talk to your your rabbi or priest or guru about it. You would just kind of try to handle it yourself and suffer through. Patricia Navarro, one of the funny things about her story is at the age of 12, she ran away. Her father was an alcoholic, good union member, but also an alcoholic. And so she started running away at 12, and her parents told the judge, put her in juvie. So she went to group home and juvenile, into the juvenile justice system. And it was in there that she found someone who was about her and who built up her sort of confidence and her way of seeing herself in the world. And so you might find somebody in an unexpected place who will encourage you, and that place might be right down the street from you or right around the corner. Yeah. Our stories make me think about some other people that I do want to mention just to get their names into the mix. Fu Li and Bo Quan were Chinese seamstresses that I knew in the 90s also, who organized when the garment contractor they were working for didn't pay them. So they went above that person's head to the producer, who was Jessica McClintock. I don't know if people on this call will remember Gunny Sacks dresses in the 80s and 90s, very expensive dresses, big prom dress, wedding dress business. And these women would be getting paid $5 for a dress that sold for thousands of dollars. They didn't think it was fair, and they organized and they changed that system. Fannie Lou Hamer, a lot of people know her name. The baby of 20 children, comes from a sharecropper family, loves poetry and reading, but has to quit school at 12 to help her family survive, has polio, but is still picking 200 to 300 pounds of cotton a day. And in her adulthood becomes involved in the democracy and civil rights movement and runs Mississippi. He runs Mississippi, scares the Democratic Party. I will put the names of the Chinese women into the comments as soon as I get a minute. So just wanted to mention those women as well.
And I think, also it's 2021 and we've got some women who are also prominent, but who would largely be considered everyday too. I'm thinking about Cori Bush in St. Louis, right? Who, she came from, she's a Midwestern girl, St. Louis born and raised, right? And she, she had a 2018 challenger. She challenged Representative Clay in 2018, did not win, in fact, lost handily in 2018. That primary, came back in 2020 and beat him. And she's now serving in Congress as, a woman of the people who knows exactly what the people need, right? So I look at Cori Bush, and then you look at AOC too. We know her story of being a bartender first and then coming to Congress. And I think that this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning about everyone recognizing what their skills and their talents are and using them to whatever capacity and extent that they can. This means you, me, everybody here, women who canvass, women who run, women who share water. We are all part of this. And it doesn't matter, if we got, like I said earlier, a lot of means, a little means, no means. There's so many ways that we're able to use our skills and talents to really build the world we want.
Yeah. All right. I think we're at the end of our time, Ginna. That's so sad. We just have to do it more and more. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everybody.